Hi and welcome to Sustainable Profits. This is the place where we talk about sustainability and profits, and please do remember to subscribe to this channel. That will make it excel. Today I will show you something, or actually share something with you, which I find extremely interesting. I've been looking at this for actually a couple of months, trying to understand what are the limits of these investments in artificial intelligence, how well supported are they in the real economy, and also what do they actually mean to planetary boundaries, and is this pace of development of artificial intelligence, as it's called, artificial intelligence, something else we can discuss about later on, but is this space really sustainable? Is this something that will create what many people and many investors around the world are really expecting? That is to create this enormous development of profits that will enrich societies, enrich individual investors, and also create a more better, safer world for all of us. Now, what is interesting, what I found interesting when I start looking at this, there has been a research done on this particular topic. The planetary boundaries, as we know, are depleting around the world. We have everything from biodiversity, everything from the ocean acidity. We have increased climate-related disasters around the world. We have all these different things that are sort of shrinking down the operating space for businesses in the world. And in the same time, we have this enormous, as many people are calling it, transformative thing that is called artificial intelligence. It's LLM models that have been developed by various companies, mainly based in the US, that are offering us a helping hand to do certain type of tasks that will make our job easier, or they will make things more efficient, more productive going forward, and so on. All of that stands, but let me give you some numbers, and these numbers are extremely interesting. The numbers related to this enormous capital allocation to artificial intelligence companies around the world have been increasing rapidly over the last 2 years. Today, on the average, I think we are investing about between $500 and $1 trillion into development of artificial intelligence company solutions. I mean, funding artificial intelligence company today in the US doesn't seem to be a big problem. Basically, investors are throwing money at you. Of course, many are saying that this is reminding us on .com crash and what has happened many years ago, and we know the history may repeat itself in this context, but that's really not what is interesting. The interesting part is that the resources that are allocated to artificial intelligence today are depleting resources, allocation of capital to other areas that are extremely important to support the very development of artificial intelligence solutions in the world in the context of resources. And when we dive into this, I would like you to remind you about one thing. When we talk about this, it's not only about energy, it's about water, it's about resources, it's about mining industry, it's about the grids. And in the end of the story, it's about the human impact the artificial intelligence will create. It's about ethics, privacy. It's about data protection. There are so many areas in relation to this new, very transformative thing that needs to be addressed and understood, not only for investors, but actually people in general. So if we are looking at the planetary boundaries and artificial intelligence, the short answer is the current growth trajectory of artificial intelligence and investments in this space, which will increase the energy demand going forward in next 5 years. We talk about next 5 years, 2025, 2030, by 160% globally. The current energy mix we have, with this type of increase, giving the mix we have on fossil versus renewable, will increase the CO2 emissions around the world to a level that it's not even comprehensible. What is more interesting is that the energy mix we have today, given the fact that we need 160% more energy going forward to feed development of this, will also create immense pressure on electricity prices for normal people around the world. Already doing that in the US, parts of the US, it's going to do that in other parts of the world. And the thing on the energy side, bear in mind this, it's not only about the resources and base load energy that is needed for this, it's actually about the grid capacity to transform that energy to the place where it needs to be used by data centers that are processing all of the data and actually using big parts of the energy. Now, energy part is one, and the simple question with a simple answer is, our current development of artificial intelligence, with all the money invested in it, aligned with the demands or framework of protecting or sustaining the planetary boundaries of this planet? The simple answer to that question is no. And the question that we can ask politicians, but also business leaders around the world that are currently running these companies, is to what extent do they actually believe that this will create a world that is much better than this one, more resilient, more sustainable, and more energy safe than the world that we have today? The part of the equation of artificial intelligence relies on a couple of very key elements. The one is resources it needs, and these resources for all kinds of semiconductors that I use and all the kind of equipment that is used, both hardware and software, are actually coming from the countries like in Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, that I had an opportunity and actually privileged to visit many times to understand how the mining industry actually looks like. And when we talk about this, you also have to bear in mind the fact that Africa does not have one single refinery of these minerals that it's producing and selling further on to China, that refines them, sells them further on to American companies that are producing developing data centers, absorbing a lot of capital to create that kind of a return to the investors. And when we talk about returns, let me sort of take this one. This is very interesting. So you have the fact that billions of dollars are invested in artificial intelligence companies. And what is the return trajectory scenario for these investments? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? It depends, but there is a sort of a verdict out there saying it's going to take between 15 to 25 years to get back money if artificial intelligence companies, as we know, some of them are very successful today, are developing commercial models where they can actually transform what they do to commercial revenue. So right now, in many ways, this is a sort of a leap of faith that financial industry in particular has done, really sort of a betting on one horse, and that horse really needs to win. And if it does not win, the repercussions around the world, financial industry, but also all kinds of other industries, will be severely impacted by this. Now, going back to the sort of a resource angle, which is the angle that is very often sort of not talked about, water. As we know, water is a source of life. We also know it's very important in many industries, but in this industry, it is particularly important because the companies like NVIDIA are using on the average, and I think the number is actually from 2023, I guess, given the fact that they're developing so rapidly right now, that number is probably much higher now, 150,000 square meters of water every single day on one facility to actually cool down and enable data centers to operate to speed and efficiency they expect them to do. Now, you multiply this with number of data centers that will be growing, and they are growing in places not in the US, not in Europe, but actually growing in places like Indonesia and Malaysia, where, as we know, energy mix is completely different than in Europe and the US, and especially, I would say, in Europe. So it means that we'll be more sort of a dependent on traditional sources of energy, including fossil energy. But now imagine the amount of water that will be needed to cool this down. And of course, the companies in this sector are aware of this. So some of these companies are trying to do what they can to produce sort of circular cooling systems, implementing different kinds of measures to do this. But looking at some of the leaders, like I did on NVIDIA, it tells you a bit of a different story. It tells you a story where the company actually does not disclose the data on this in relation to the supply chain. It's actually not disclosing a lot of data on supply chain, scope 3 emissions and all. And when we talk about NVIDIA, when we talk about the artificial intelligence companies, you have to bear in mind two things. One is they are very much dependent on supply chain in terms of the raw materials refinery, sectors that are not really in the places where the data centers are. The second is that they are extremely energy intensive, and they are also needing a lot of resources, localized resources, to actually make the operations work. What is also interesting is that if you're looking at the spectrum of where the emissions are, we talk about the climate and climate emissions, the CO2 emissions, everything is a scope 3. And when you look at the reporting done by these companies, including NVIDIA and some others, the reporting on scope 3 emissions is quite limited. And in fact, and this is something that I would like to share with you, due to the political context that I previously addressed in terms of being very false, many of the companies are also discontinuing reporting on issues like diversity and inclusion, human rights issues. They are also taking out a lot of detail in how their supply chain operate. Now, geopolitical situation is as it is. We have physical consequences of climate change. You know, there are many people doubting that, but the facts are quite clear. The science has spoken, and we know from the experience that this is actually something that is creating a significant financial risk. Now, I want to bring you into something that I think is related to AI. It will have an impact on the valuation of AI going forward, especially in relation to the supply chain. Now, insurance industry is not able to cover big parts of the US and now actually in Europe, including countries like Sweden, physical costs related to climate change for real estate property for people living in these countries. Because if you cannot insure your home, the bank will not give you the mortgage, you cannot buy a house, you cannot pay it back. So basically you're going to get homeless. Now imagine that artificial intelligence is companies are gathering all of these resources through their global supply chains from the places that will be hit by significant amount of climate-related disasters, catastrophes, and so on. And many of these companies are not insured, will not be able to be insured, and will pass on that cost onto the artificial intelligence companies going forward. And that cost will be passed to you and me as a consumer and investor. And the valuation of these companies, of course, will be significantly impacted. Now, I started this session by telling you about the sort of a planetary boundaries in artificial intelligence. Mathematically, if you look at it from a pure numbers perspective, does not add up. It actually creates no sense because we are not going to address one of the major challenges we are facing, and that is resilience of ecosystems we need to survive. And this is not about the virtue of being moral about this. This is about the pure resilience of societies, businesses that need to survive to create jobs, to create growth that we need. And if that is not addressed now, it's not going to be addressed forward. Now, when we talk about this, there is another angle to this entire area of artificial intelligence that is sort of not really in the focus right now. And recently there have been some articles about this where artificial intelligence companies are cooperating very closely with the military powers in different countries, especially in the US, but I guess in other countries as well, where the services will be used for the security operations and also operations that we don't even know about. And this is the bigger question in terms of how the artificial intelligence, from an ethical and moral point of view, will be used to either oppress or suppress, or maybe to a certain extent even protect people in different countries, and also how this technology will then be contained and controlled and actually governed in a way so it does not hurt us going forward. So you have the angle on artificial intelligence to energy, you have an angle to military use, defense, weapon system, and then you have an angle which is related to politics. We know, you and I and many others are, of course, participating in different kinds of forums, and you have seen artificial intelligence generated images, stories, stuff that is happening around the world, conflicts that do not exist, politicians that say things that are not true, and so on and so on. The regulation and governance of artificial intelligence use in different parts of the world and also in different segments and sectors will also pose a big threat to the industry itself. The regulation will have to force these companies to contain a lot of things they are doing today for free, because it will have imminent danger to the political stability, not only in certain countries, but actually across the world. And with this and the short sort of insight on NVIDIA, which I will share with you now, NVIDIA is a fantastic company. It's a story that it's almost like a magical story, a company that's been growing like billions over the last couple of years. But if you're scratching the surface, you actually see that, yes, they are doing a lot of things in their own business operations, things that are good for company, good for the shareholders in terms of both sustainability and profits. But if you're looking at the way how they operate their supply chain, how they disclose information about the human rights, labor issues, safety issues, health and safety issues in their supply chain, how they tackle CO2 emissions in the scope 3, which is indirect emissions created by the business in the supply chain, they are far out. They are not even close to that. And this is where the biggest risk is. So the intensity of the business they are running, center of gravity, where the business is gravitating towards, the GPU sort of services or models they are producing to sustain this sort of a data transformation thing are, of course, efficient, but that efficiency is not really depleting the impact. It's called the Jevons Paradox, and it actually means that increasing efficiency is not necessarily depleting the environmental impact or impact it creates. And when we get to the point where the resources that we need to support this immense development of artificial intelligence going forward, energy as well as raw materials, has hit the roof, and that roof has been there for many years. It has been there for many years because of development of electrical vehicles, this entire industry, including renewable energy industry, has depleted a lot of resources, endless resources, not circular, but endless resources, mainly coming out of Africa. Adding the equation mathematics on artificial intelligence and need for these resources in the context of this enormous transformative process we are in will actually deplete these endless resources even more. The question we have is sustainability profits, sustainable profits. In the context of artificial intelligence, it's still very difficult to say and to make a case that this is something that will be both sustainable and profitable. Thank you for showing interest in sustainable profits. Please do remember to subscribe and help us make this channel excel. Next topic is politics and sustainability, or let me put it this way, sustainability of the politics. A very interesting topic I hope you can join in and listen to. Thank you very much and see you next time.